Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Cilinix Crypto and welcome to your daily dose of Bitcoin. We're going to do a full update on the current situation, talk about some news that you need to know about. We have some news coming out today as well. Nothing major though, so we don't need to spend too much time talking about that. We'll talk a little bit about the medium-term and long-term projections and my thoughts on Bitcoin. And we'll talk about the short-term. I think the short-term is pretty clear right here, or at least I've been pretty clear about what I think. I think we are forming a local bottom. We had quite a lot of momentum coming in right here from 81,000. We reclaimed 84,000, which is a very strong but also very relevant level structure-wise that we really needed to hold, right? So that was the point of control, just as a bit of a refresher. There was a point of control of the range we had right here, February and April. And this is the first time with the bearish pressure since the beginning of November that we tested that range. And then when you test previous ranges to the downside in a downtrend, which at this point of time we are in a downtrend, it's always critical that you get a good reaction at the point of control of that previous range. If you do not get a strong reaction there, it usually signals that we're going to drop down to the bottom of the range, and then it becomes much easier to drop down to a balance even lower. And when we're talking about a balance even lower, we're talking about this balance right here between 70 and 60,000, which is obviously not what we want to drop down into. Short term, I think that's unlikely. Long term, it could be a little bit more likely, at least, that we drop down into 70,000 and 63,000. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about my long-term predictions and thoughts on Bitcoin. But in that sense, like I said, short-term, we've been able to reclaim a very relevant level with that 84,000 level. And since then, we also saw some positive things, such as the funding rate decreasing. Right now, you also have the open interest, aka the leverage in the markets, decreasing rapidly and methodically, which is usually also a sign of bottoms forming. Every bottom is formed when the open interest comes down significantly. But while those are positive signs, and we also have absorption going on, right? So we have futures still selling off to a certain extent, selling off or short or long positions closing, short positions opening, whatever. But then you have the spot order book depth being quite high, and you can also see that Bitcoin was making higher lows while the futures CVD, the cumulative volume delta, was decreasing. That's called absorption. That's pretty good. Whether it's absorption because of short covering, whatever, it's absorption. So we got some pretty good signs. However, I think it's good to be cautious as well, and that mostly has to do with two things. I think you need to be cautious both short term and long term. And when we're talking about the short term reason to be cautious right here is the fact that there's no new leverage coming in. I can point towards every real bottom, right, in the past. Can I get some open interest data as well, please? Yes, and if you take a look at every bottom, there is at least some sort of leverage coming in, right? So sometimes it's not even that much. That is true. But if you take a look at this bottom right here, the 9th of April, for example, if you take a look at this temporary bottom we made the 11th of March, but also if you go back even further, like every bottom, or at least every time we bottom out and we start to move up again, there's leverage coming in. At this point of time, that is not happening. I think it's quite logical why that is not happening, given the market circumstances in the last month and a half now, especially also with the 10th of October. So that's not coming in. So that means that I think we are still bottoming. And if we are still bottoming, we're not rallying. So I think that's something to be cautious for. You can see right now Bitcoin has some strong resistance at 89,000. That is also critical resistance. I do think we'll be able to break above that in the short term. But I think you need to be ready for moves like this as well. We still have some imbalances towards 84,000. And right now we're very much forming balance between 88,000. Well, let's say 89,000, between 89,000 and 84,000. I think you should be ready for those spikes to the downside. And then eventually from this consolidation, I think we will break out. However, and then rally into like 90, 93, 95. Those are all possibilities. So this is what I would expect under the current conditions. The current conditions, to be completely fair, are pretty good, right? I mean, equities, as you can see, are rallying. Risk on equities, such as the Russell 2000, those are rallying. The volatility index is dumping. So these are all fundamentals, which I love to talk about, of course, that are good enough for me to suggest this. But I do think, you know, this being my thought short term and medium term, I do think you need to be honest. And if you look at the 3-day time frame for Bitcoin right now, right, and you take a look at this structure, like how big is the probability that we are just going to instantly trend up again from here into higher highs, right? So into 135,000. I think that probability is low. If you look at the weekly time frame, this is the first time that we broke down below the yearly rolling VWAP and the weekly uptrend since, what is it, October 2023. That means something. Okay, I think on the higher time frames, it is more likely that we have started some sort of a downtrend, and that whether it's December 2025, more likely going to be 2026, I still think it is more likely that we're going to drop down a little bit lower into that level at 70 and 67,000. And from there, we'll see again. I think we have some sort of a possibility to maybe from there start rallying again, although it's not going to be easy. But that is something I think you need to be aware of as well, which I'll update to every now and then when it's necessary. But that is what I think you need to know regarding the market right now. It's a little bit of a longer video. My apologies for that. Maybe you like it. Let me know. But that's it for now. Thank you for watching. Take care, everybody, and bye.